Jacob Chase is one of the most successful young horror writers and directors we have today. This was a great conversation. He is someone that I really look up to. I first discovered his horror short Larry, which is at a whopping 1.5 million views currently on YouTube. One of the best horror shorts that I've ever seen. He was gracious enough to have a conversation with me prior, but I really wanted to bring him on to talk about his process and his mindset right now, how that relates to what he was thinking about the industry when he first started out. And this was a great conversation.
It was cool to hear all the different aspects of what he does in the film industry too, how he came from. It's the classic path, but from editing, he'd always written stuff. He was a child actor, and then, he got into horror, and he's done things of all genres, and his ups and downs. He's in the thick of the biz. It sounds like it was fun to hear.
He's one of those rare examples of someone who has a short pop, like a horror short pop, that actually leads to a green light. Larry ended up materializing as Come Play in 2020. He also has worked with Crypt TV on The Girl in the Woods on Peacock. So he's had his feet in both the television and the film space. And at the end of the day, Duke, what he said, as far as you are in the driver's seat, you are the one who, it's all a numbers game. You have to be the one who's generating these projects. And even when all the stars align, even when you win the lottery and you're represented, at the end of the day, it all comes down to what you put forward, and you're the one who's in the driver's seat.
Yeah, he still does short films, even though he has like big network TV shows and big feature films and stuff. He's got like 10 things going on at once, he was saying.
You just got to create. You can't ever stop creating. So please enjoy our conversation here with Jacob Chase. I just want to say first, I'm really, really excited about having you on. My specific path when it comes to filmmaking is very horror specific. It's very much in like the David Sandberg type thing of you're one of the few people that I've found who have actually followed that format. I know that you had your roots in screenwriting and you kind of transitioned into the directing thing, but as far as making a short, putting it out there, getting a lot of attention, and that actually materializing into getting a green light and ending up with this feature, those examples are few and far between, So I really appreciate you coming on. I love the conversation that we've had previously. You're someone who I really look up to, and yeah, man, it's really good to see you.
No, well, that's all very, very nice and flattering of you to say. Look, I also am inspired by Sandberg and the others that have come before us and now after us, like Parker Finn, and
right.
Definitely. Look, we're all just trying to get stuff made, so we're all in it together.
That's it. I'd love to kick things off with kind of getting your mindset right now, as far as where you see, being this horror filmmaker. Obviously you're you have a lot of success to this point. You're kind of on the other side of things, in which you've made a few things you're really proud of. You've gotten some attention. I'm curious, do you think a David Sandberg type 2016 era still applies today? Or do you feel like there, at least for starting filmmakers out there, do you feel like there would be a different approach that you would take?
I think it's really hard to chase anything, any specific path. When I made Larry, which became Come Play, I did not make it thinking like, oh, I'm going to be Sandberg and I'm going to turn this into a feature. I made it as a standalone thing that, I think that's sort of the key, is that it's about making the thing you're making great. As that's what you should focus on, is my feeling. And then sometimes that can lead to something great, but it might not be the thing that leads to something great. That's why, in our previous conversation, we talked about writing a lot, because like I am aware that my getting that movie made had much more to do with my previous writing successes,
right,
and career. And the short film helped, obviously, but it was just one of many things. And I had made countless, short films before that in other genres and all sorts of other stuff that had maybe gotten attention or gotten people excited, but had never had the let's make this into a feature thing. So it's really hard to know. And does it still apply? I mean, I think it still applies that making shorts is a great way to get noticed, and a great way to also practice your craft. So whether that turns into a feature or not, who knows? But I think either way, it's something filmmakers need to be doing.
By the way, Jacob is doing horror genre, and he's doing short films, and his work ethic is incredible. It sounds like you guys have gotten to talk a little bit, which I love hearing. My background a little bit, I'm a writer as well. I come from acting first, and but I'm more in comedy and everything first and foremost. But of course, I dabble in a little bit of everything. But yeah, it's so fascinating to see that short films still, like if you make something that you're proud of enough, no matter what it is, whether it's a commercial or short film, it's a great calling card. And then after that, and I'm curious, by the way, I saw Larry, and congratulations on a lot of the things that you've done, but so cool. How's that going with the feature film aspect of it? And I'm fascinated how that plot idea of the toll booth and the dude that gets, finds this like unearthed thing that gets dropped in his lap will kind of come into a feature film.
More specifically, just piggybacking off of that, as far as Come Play goes, making that feature in a pandemic type set, at least it being released in like a pandemic type setting. Can you touch on that as far as like being your first feature and just what that was like in general? Because I'm sure, it's a completely different experience from, let's say like it wasn't happening during a pandemic. I feel like it's a lot to put on your plate for a first.
I mean, that's that. Who knows what would have been different? Obviously we didn't intend for it to come out during a pandemic when we made it, which was a bummer. I mean, we, our release date was announced, and then the pandemic happened, and obviously that was tragic for a lot of reasons. And then the studio, along with myself, we sort of collaborated on a new date, and releasing it in 2020. Halloween was, it was a big gamble, and it paid off in some ways. I think, we were very little competition. People that were going to the theaters came out in droves to see it. I went and saw it a bunch, and every screening I went to was packed, so that was a blast. But of course, there was a lot of people not comfortable going to the theater yet, and a lot of theaters weren't open yet. So I think we'll never know what the alternate reality version of this would have been. Could we have had some much bigger success? Maybe, or maybe we would have gotten swallowed by all the other movies coming out. So who knows? I think, luckily more and more people keep discovering it now that it's on Showtime and people can rent it. And I'm hoping that it continues to find a life. And, in the meantime, I'm obviously just working on the next couple movies. Of course. That was a while ago now. So it's just trying to make the next ones.
And obviously, wow. Okay. So I've only seen your short film, Larry. I didn't see the feature film's already been out for a while.
Yeah. I shot. Yeah. The feature came out in 2020, called Come Play.
Gotcha.
So see it. Lots of people still have to see it. That's what I mean.
Oh my gosh. No, I'm excited, man. I love the original premise and the vibe and everything. So yeah.
Would you be able to touch on a bit as far as like becoming a screenwriter, how you got those first shots? Did you win some competitions and you got some attention that way, or how did that materialize for you?
Well, everyone's story is going to be a different kind of winding road. Mine, so I was an editor for a long time. I was working on, first commercials and music videos and eventually features. And some of the producers I worked for as an editor, I eventually sort of got close enough with them where I started sort of slipping the idea of like, hey, I want to write and direct as well. Mm-hmm. I also, Come Play is technically not my first movie. I made a small indie film called Four-Faced Liar in 2010. And that premiered at Slamdance. And, we made a very small but it did decently for what it was. And that also sort of helped me get a little bit of attention, not honestly, not really from a directing perspective as much as I hoped or wanted, but just in terms of like putting me on the map a little bit with like getting some, like people knew the movie, and I could sort of like talk to people a little bit more, in different parts of the industry that I hadn't gotten access to before. But it was really, that my editing career continued for many, many years after I made that little movie. And then I started, sharing my writing with some of these producers I was working with. And a couple of things sort of happened at once. One of those producers had like a new assignment, was looking to bring a writer director on, had read some of my work at that point, and I had sort of edited this movie that really, they really felt like I kind of helped the movie a lot in the edit. And so they gave me a chance to come in and pitched for a while, eventually won the job. And that was my first writing assignment. And it was non-WGA. So it was like very, like somehow he worked it where he could do it non-guild. And then at the same time, I also, this is how long ago this was back when Amazon was doing this thing where you could like, people would submit scripts and they would like choose some to make into movies. This was before the Amazon we have now, which is like a proper movie studio. And I was hired to like rewrite one of those scripts. Never got made into a movie, but I sort of had both those jobs kind of in the same month or two period. And those are the first couple things. And then I got one more job and another, and a lot of sort of non-WGA stuff for the first maybe year, I would say. And then, I started getting more work at proper studios and getting my WGA membership, and then, just writing. I don't know, at some point I was writing like 4 or 5 movies a year for different places, and it was great, but also nothing got made, so it was frustrating at the same time, but it was a great experience, and I got to work with some awesome directors and producers and stuff.
And still writing 4 to 5 screenplays a year, that's a lot. I mean, that kind of like discipline, is that something that you had to learn? Is there a certain do you have a certain process as far as finishing screenplays that you've developed over the years?
Or rewriting for other people too, and doing drafts and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, practice. It's really all it is. It's you sort of don't have a choice, right? Like I remember my first spec I ever wrote, or my first like sort of, I wrote scripts like in high school or whatever, but like my first like real spec that I was like, okay, this is a movie and I want to get it made. And, probably took me a year to write, and I was like, and then I focused on that for another year. It's like, we're going to get it made. And then when it didn't get made, it was like, oh shit, I don't have anything else. And so I very quickly was like, oh, I need to just like have a lot more that I'm doing. So it's just because it's a numbers game, I feel. And over time, you slowly learn to get more like just faster and sort of, it's really just practice like anything. It's like you start to know where the pitfalls are and what's like, okay, that's not going to work because of this, or that might work because of this. And then when people are paying you, you don't have a choice. You got to turn that in 12 weeks or, you're messing up a relationship. So, it's my life now is, I still write close to that amount. It's now split between TV writing and feature writing. And then also, lots of pitches I'm writing, or I'm in treatment phases of different things. And, I probably have like 10 different projects right now that I'm on various stages of. Some are casting, some are, trying to get attachments, some I'm writing pages on, some I'm pitching on. So it's just, you sort of have to do it all, I think. There's the writer directors, the auteur people we think of. They're like one project every 3 years comes out, and like that's all they've worked on. But like even that, we don't really know the behind the scenes. And the successful working writers I know and I'm friends with all sort of do what I do, which is just constantly working on a ton of things at once, because you never know what's going to be the one that actually gets made.
How did you learn how to write? Was it like a book? Was it just the fact of doing it multiple times? You kind of got a feel of it, or
I don't know that I ever had like a specific book, but I've certainly read screenwriting books, and it's a mix of everything. I did go to a film school, and there was a screenwriting class, so we would have to write scripts in that class, and like in the end of the semester you'd had to have a full, feature screenplay. And then even in I had a lucky experience in high school. I was in like AP English, and you could either take regular AP English or AP English, the screenwriting edition. And there was a teacher who just loved screenwriting, and he sort of, we still had to read all the, classic books and write the reports and everything, but we also, like, on top of all that normal stuff, got to sort of read and write screenplays. And so, and then I was also, I was a child actor from at 8 years old. I got my first role, and I was a professional actor till I was about 14, and I worked a lot. And I learned a lot doing that. It was, right. I was on set constantly and reading scripts all the time. So it's something that I've sort of been around a lot. And I think you just soak up that knowledge. But truthfully, I would say the most helpful thing for me was just reading a lot of scripts later once I knew I wanted to write. And I remember there was like one script in particular that I read that was just, I forget the writer, unfortunately, and I feel bad about that, but it was a script called We Gotta Get Out of This Place. And
good title.
Yeah, and it got made eventually, and they I forget what they changed the title to, but the script was fantastic, and it was very odd. It was in the way that it was formatted and written. It was like a Dan Gilroy kind of written script where there's like missing slug lines, and it's like very visual and very, very punchy with lots of fucks and stuff like that. And not that I ever like tried to write exactly like that, but it opened my mind up and be like, oh, this is like, we're trying to like make people see the movie on the page, of course. And so like from that point on, that's sort of always been my goal, is to just make people see it as much as I can. And that takes any number of ways. I'll throw pictures in there, I'll do full blank pages, I do all sorts of weird things. And it's just like, because I want people to be excited reading a script, and just like I get excited when I read a really fun script with a great story.
Definitely. Your design for Larry was, I mean, one of the best that I've seen. And obviously that came from your roots doing haunted houses. Can you touch a bit on like how that even came to be, how many years you did the haunted house thing, and why? I mean, has that just always been a thing you wanted to do?
Yeah, I mean, haunted houses sort of combine a lot of things I love. I mean, it's storytelling, it's theater. I grew up in theater too, and then of course horror, which I love. So I started doing the haunt back when the first time I ever did it, I was like in middle school. Like I tarped up my mom's porch and like scared people and decorated it, but then it kept getting bigger. And like in high school, my friend Logan and I spent all my bar mitzvah money on buying like tarp and PVC pipe and Halloween props and smoke machines, and like we took over the whole front yard and like built this really janky haunted house. But it got better at each year, and then I stopped for a long time. But then in my early 20s, my friends and I decided to do a haunt again because they knew I had done it as a kid. Do it as like a charity event for this cystic fibrosis charity we were a part of, and now as an adult who has very particular taste and high expectations, it just went crazy, and it became this like epic theatrical experience, sort of this haunt that I was very proud of, and people would come from all over LA and drive hours to get there. It was really crazy. And it became very successful, and I learned how to scare people. I also learned a lot about suspenseful storytelling. There was, and it also combined like my love of magic as well, because we would do like Pepper's Ghosts effects and projection effects, and we had a floor that dropped and stunt performers, and it was like epic. And we stopped that in 2014 was the last year we did that. And that was around the time when sort of my writing career was starting, where like I had been at that point, like writing several scripts a year, and I just like didn't have time to take the 4 months off that it took to like do this haunt every year anymore. And I was really in this position where I was like, we had sort of gotten some offers for like some funding to like make the haunt bigger. Wow. And I was like, really, I was very torn, because I've always wanted to be a filmmaker, but I was also like, I love this. Yeah. Maybe I should just like try this other career path. And, I had lots of meetings with the other sort of haunt professionals I know. And obviously film is extremely difficult as a career, but it seemed like haunted house creation was potentially even more difficult to like make a good living at. But I still miss it, and I hope to go back to it at some point, or at least include it in my work somehow. And I'm actually a movie I'm working on that it looks like it'll be my next movie is about someone that opens up a haunted house. So it's still cool. Is part of my life.
Do you ever do escape rooms or anything? That's sort of on the same.
Of course, lots. Yeah, I love escape rooms. I did a great one the other night called The Nest that I highly recommend in LA. It's kind of part escape room, part like immersive theater. It's very cool.
Oh, there was that famous immersive theater thing on Sleep No More, right? Was the big one? Do you guys know that?
Yeah, here's my Sleep No More mask right here.
I'm
Insane.
talking to the right person here. Exactly. Oh my gosh.
Big Sleep No More fan.
There you go.
What's that?
I've yet to do an escape room. I met someone that was in Sleep No More as an actor, but I just haven't found the time, I guess.
I'm
you haven't found the time? It's only an hour. I think you can find the time.
I'm not looking hard enough for the time.
Yeah. I'm blanking on the names, but some of my favorite horror features are ones based around like haunted houses, haunted attractions. Do any come to mind? Like there was that one where there was the killer who was like the antagonist. You didn't know if they were in on it or if they were an actor or if they were.
I mean, there's a few. There's Hell House. There's Haunt. There's Hellfest.
Hellfest. Yeah, Haunt was also great. Yeah,
Hellfest, directed by Greg Plotkin, who's also a wonderful editor who cut Come Play. And yeah, there's a bunch of those that are really, really fun, and I think I have a new spin on it, hopefully. So we'll see.
The merging of those two worlds for you, I think, would be really cool. See what you come up with. That's dope.
Yeah, well, hopefully you'll get to see it, next year.
Yeah, definitely, man. I loved Copycat, and I don't feel like it got enough attention. It's like, did you come up with that during the pandemic? Just like your girlfriend kind of making something?
100%. Yeah, she's my wife, actually. But yes, we just, that was within the first few weeks of the pandemic. I was going nuts, like just in our house, and like, I don't know. I just tried to make something, and it was, I don't know. It was fun. We shot over like a night and then did some more shots the next night. And I don't know. It was just a fun little thing. I do have, I recently made another horror short because I still make those because I love making stuff. And it's another horror thing. So we'll put it out in the next month or so. And hopefully you dig that one. That was a little bit more planning than the Copycat one.
Speaking of which, though, on like the subject of hobbies, this podcast is Hollywood Beginnings. We talk about like to balance your creative life. You got to always be doing other stuff. Do you have anything that keeps you sane, or are you just creative all the time, just thinking horror and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I do struggle with finding other hobbies, but I love escape rooms, as you mentioned, are a big one that we go out to. We love board games. My wife and I do a lot of game nights, and we'll go to friends for game nights.
What type of games? What type of games generally for game night? Charades?
Sure, we'll do some charades, but no, we tend to like the, I would say, medium difficulty games. My wife is more like into the even crazier ones, but I'd say, on the low end of, not low end of whatever, like, anywhere from Catan to like Wingspan and Betrayal at the House on the Hill, like, some of these more, we love, like, is this a board game show? Like, I love amoeba placement games and like resource collecting games. And, I think there's certain, styles of game that we really like.
No, I'm taking notes because I love the idea of just getting together with friends and doing something that like stimulates your brain too.
Yeah. Oh, it's huge. I mean, I love doing that. But look, I truthfully, it's very hard for me to be pulled away from work. I mean, I struggle with it, and I am sort of, it's always on, when you work for yourself and you're writing, it's you're always thinking about it, and you always create more work for yourself. and there's always something to do. So it's whenever I'm away from my desk, I feel a little bit like I got to get back. Not healthy though.
Yeah, it's one of those things, right? You have to like designate yourself to have that balance. And I mean, debatably.
It's tough. I struggle with that too. We're always talking about that. I'm curious, Jacob, being on this other side where it's like, at least on the traditional side, you're doing pretty well. Is there anything that you would have done differently or like advise your younger self? And also, it's like part two of that question. I found that in this industry, there are some things that you have to ask permission for making. And then also there are some things where you can just go forward and kind of just make something and just create like you did for Copycat. Do you feel like there's like a balance that you've had to strike between the two, or have you always just tried to like create and that's kind of how you found your way?
Well, to answer that question first, because that's the one I remember. You'll have to re-ask me the first one, but sure. That one, I guess I don't know exactly what you mean, but you have to ask permission. I mean, certainly like when I'm getting paid to write something or make something, like I'm indebted to like the producers or whatever the IP is or who's paying me essentially. But I still, even in that case, I mean, I'm still making it my own, and I've been hired generally because I have a point of view, you know, and like no one wants a writer who's just gonna do what they say, you know. It's, you're hired because like you're the only person that can write this. You have this, whatever your deep emotional connection is to the material, like that's why you're hired and why you want to do it. And everything I write, I'm precious about, and I feel, you know, I guess there's a mix between like I'm very precious about it when I'm writing, and then I've learned to like, okay, at some point you have to let it go, and you have to rewrite it and stuff, you know. So you have to sort of constantly be on this knife's edge of like between loving and caring deeply about every word you write, and then also being like not too precious so you can like erase it all if you need to. But yeah, I mean, I just making stuff, and I try to just make what I want to make. I mean, because I think especially now, I mean, really ever, always I did that, but like especially now, like I said, I'm still making some shorts in between other stuff, and it's because, you know, like I shot this TV show last year that I had a really good experience on, and you know, I directed 4 episodes, but it was also like it wasn't totally mine, you know, like I didn't write it, and I loved the script, I love the writers, and I love the actors, and it was so cool. But ultimately, like I wanted to make something that was just mine again, you know. And so like I went off and made this other short, and just because I was like, okay, I gotta get that creative juice out. So when I make stuff for myself, it's especially now, I think, just things I want to make, you know, that are exciting. Your other question.
The other part was basically like your younger self. Like if there's anything that you would tell your younger self as far as attacking this industry or thinking about everything in a different light.
I mean, I think I would have, you know, I wish I had understood the sort of numbers game part of it earlier. I think so many of my idols, who are still my idols to a certain degree, but like Paul Thomas Anderson and James Cameron, or, you know, these people that sort of make every movie they write, it seems like, and it's these sort of like these, and every movie is perfect, and you know, it's like I'd still love that, but it's also like that's like 10 people you can count on one hand, you know, or 2 hands unless you have a 10-fingered hand. And you know, the people that I've learned to admire more are the people that just like can keep doing it, like be consistent, and like have a career that like pays for the family, and like you can afford to have a house and a car, you know, all that stuff. And you know, that's what I worked toward for a very long time. And I think earlier in my career, like when I made my first movie and some of the early shorts I made and stuff, I think I just spent too much time on them. You know, I think it's obviously you want them all to be great, but you just, the quicker you get better at like just churning stuff out and writing more, that I just by nature of like you have more stuff for that people have an opportunity to read or watch,
Right.
you'll have more opportunities to win the lottery.
And then when one thing doesn't win the lottery or get the green light, you're not going to be devastated with that, like being your one thing. It's like you have 9 other,
Yeah, I mean, you are still devastated every fucking time, but it's but it is a little bit easier because there's just not enough time. And honestly, part of it is probably a coping mechanism for me, because it's like I do know how devastated I get when things fall apart for various reasons.
Yeah.
And this way, at least, okay, I can be depressed and then go on the next day. I mean, when I like come play, for instance, I mean, so I probably told you about this, Jacob, before, maybe not, but I had this TV show that I had created at ABC called Harmony. There was a pilot I wrote and went through the Sundance Lab with and sold to ABC. And we had this amazing director, John Chu, was attached to direct it. And like, it was a musical, and Stephen Schwartz was writing the music, and like we had a great cast and crew. And we were like 3 weeks away from shooting. And it was like, we were in our offices, we were building sets, like, it was going, and it felt like, oh yes, like something I created is like getting made.
Mm-hmm.
And then it got shut down 3 weeks before production, and it was absolutely devastating. And in that time, like that day, it was a Friday that I came home from ABC crying, and my wife, girlfriend at the time, she was like, hey, like people have been asking like what you want to do with Larry, because Larry was already out at that point, the short, and she was like, people are asking like how that could be a feature. Why don't you figure out what that feature can be? And I picked myself up listening to my wife, and I wrote up like a few pages of like what I thought the Larry movie could be. And then the next week I sent that off to my agents, and they sort of sent that out, and then I had a bunch of meetings, and like by that next Friday we had sold it in a bidding war. And like it was that's one of those stories that I think sounds glamorous, because it is, but it's also like that's not what happens most of the time. But it is a fun story, and it is like it is true that it's a reminder to myself that like the only way to get something made when you're in heartbreak or like have something fall apart is to just like work on the next thing.
Definitely.
So I do remember that story often, and Jess reminds me of it often as well.
That illustrates just like the extreme highs and lows of this thing too. It's like a roller coaster, man.
But I also I don't think I would have been as good and as ready to make Come Play had I not just like basically gotten a master class from John Chu from the last 6 months when we were working on our TV show. And I really that was incredibly helpful. So things happen. I don't want to say things happen for a reason. That's bullshit. But like things, you'll find positives in the negatives later in your life, I think.
For sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead, dude.
No, just it's a classic life lesson. Sometimes you get to that low point, you get devastated, and right around the corner, it's just like something you couldn't foreseen. Just much better.
I think how people who aren't repped think about reps is probably very different from someone who's been repped for a while. How do you utilize reps? How do you think that, how do you see reps? It's obviously not this golden ticket where all of a sudden all of your dreams come true and you get everything greenlit. But I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
I was as obsessed about getting a rep as anybody when I was younger, before I had reps. I get it. And it's really hard for someone who doesn't have reps to hear how little they matter. I mean, look, I love my reps. I've been with my manager for upwards of 10 years now. I've moved agents a couple times, but I really like my team right now. But I mean, ultimately they are there to support what you are doing. I mean, like my agents didn't make Larry. Like they were helpful in sort of getting it out there because they really believed in that one.
Right.
But I still had to do that. I mean, and same with everything else I've ever done. I mean, they can sort of get you in a room when they believe you are ready to be in a room, and that's obviously helpful. But like you have to get yourself ready for that for that room, you know, and
Right.
I just, you know, every time I've sort of gotten a different rep, or like my first reps is because I was hustling and like I wasn't trying to get a rep. Like that's the big thing, is every time I've like got an agent or like switched agents or whatever, like I was not actively like, I gotta get an agent. I think it come, and I know it sounds hokey to say like they come to you when they want you, but it is true, because like they only want you, like managers and agents are like heat-seeking missiles, where it's like
sure.
someone's got it's excitement about them, like let me come get you so I can write, you know, again, I don't want to speak shitty about all agents, because those are great agents, but like they are essentially just profiting off of the good stuff you're doing. And I just really believe that they will come when something happens, you know. Like I know, like Jacob, you make a ton of your like horror shorts online last I remember from you, and like if one of those takes off in like a really big way, like you'll get calls most likely, right? Because that'll get passed around and people will be like, oh shit, I gotta get this guy.
Right.
But that's up to you, you know, like that is
Totally.
ultimately like you creating the opportunity for yourself. And so I think the best thing I ever did was just like try to stop caring about the agent thing, because you don't want the agent or the manager who you're chasing. You want the one who's chasing you. So yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
That's incredibly helpful to hear. I mean, especially now, Jacob, I appreciate it. As far as last time we spoke, I know your journey has been screenwriting, and that kind of led to these other opportunities. I know some of your advice to me was to, and any like aspiring horror filmmakers, to write more scripts, write really like high impact, high concept screenplays. But just touching on what you just said, do you feel like a short can have the same kind of impact, or even like building an audience online?
Yeah, it can. It's just, it is mysterious how those happen. You know, I mean, why did Lights Out become the huge success? I mean, I think there's ways we can analyze it now after the fact with hindsight, right? Like it was only 2 minutes. That's huge. There's like, it's such a simple concept, but an amazing concept.
It's scary.
It's scary. There's no dialogue, so it works in any language. Like there's just so many things about it that work. But as you know, Sandberg had made 10 other shorts or whatever before that, and like they were all great. And why did that one take off and the others didn't? Like who knows ultimately. So I think who knows? That's the problem, right? Is like you don't know if one of those shorts or why it's going to work or not. And I think if you overanalyze it too much, then you run the risk of like you're chasing something instead of just making what you really are desperate to make.
100%.
You know, the writing thing, as I said to you, probably is like, you know, it's very rare. And I didn't have this, right? Like I wasn't plucked from obscurity like Sandberg was. Like, you know, it's very rare to like have a great short and then get to make the feature. You know, Parker obviously did that, which was amazing. But it's just rare, you know, like we know all those filmmakers' names because there's only so many of us. And the writing thing, there's just so many more paths forward with that way. You know, for representatives, they see an opportunity to make money off of you quicker, because getting a movie made is incredibly difficult. I mean, I've made movies and TV shows now, and it's still very hard, you know, to get another movie made. And the writing is 100% what pays my bills still. And it's what pays my agents, right? I think that's why the writing thing to me is very helpful, because you're getting in those rooms, you're getting to know studios, executives, other filmmakers, and you're getting to prove yourself in this other way as a writer, which is not so dissimilar from directing ultimately. And there's a big track record of writers becoming directors. So it's like, that's something people can visualize. That's why I think that's a good way that works. It's definitely not the only way that works, but it's the way I understand how to sort of get stuff moving forward and to get people to know you and your work in the industry.
It's incredibly helpful. And it goes back to what you said earlier too, as far as this being a numbers game and, you know, not being so precious about like one individual script and just continuing to just put out those lottery tickets and kind of seeing what hits.
Yeah. I'm seeing the less than a minute remaining.
Yeah. I've got this. We got like 40 seconds. Look, I just want to say, Jacob, no stress, no pressure.
We're so late in the pandemic. You got to get the full Zoom.
I just want to say, I mean, I really can't thank you enough for everything, for our conversations that we've had. You're someone that I really look up to. And, you know, I just wish you continued success. And I'm sure that this will help a lot of people who are just starting out. So I appreciate
you very much. Thanks for having me, guys, and happy to talk about the stuff. And I wish you guys success too. I mean, I know you guys are doing it and trying to make a lot of stuff. So I hope it all works for you.
Thank you, brother. We'll talk soon. I appreciate you.